do men want?
Manifests itself in relationships, and you feel it in relationships, and they can be very powerful spiritually. And if that's what you need, that's what you should go for.
And she said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome to Speaking of Men. You're watching public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. Our guest today is Randy Noah, director of the Children's Court CASA program here in Albuquerque. He's been director since the program first started in 1985. He's also president of the New Mexico CASA Network, and has spent much of the past 3 years developing CASA in New Mexico. Welcome to the program, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out on a Saturday. Tell us what CASA is, what it stands for, and how it came to be.
CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, and CASAs are volunteers trained by Children's Court to fact-find in child abuse cases. And what that involves is gathering information about the case from all the people involved in it, the parents, children, therapists, attorneys, social workers, everybody. And then summarizing that information and then making recommendations directly to the judge hearing the case.
You were telling me that our late Judge John Brown founded that program.
Correct, yeah, back in 1985.
And that was basically, I guess, so that he would have as much information as possible. And
right, he felt he wasn't getting the full story, and a judge is limited to what comes before him, what information people tell him in court.
Right.
And he felt that he wasn't getting all the information. It wasn't up to date in some cases, and it was worrying him because he was having to make major decisions about these kids' lives with information that was, you know, not always factual. And so he asked me to put together a program that would use volunteers to increase the information flow.
And so it gives them an unbiased view.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Tell me a little bit about some of the types of child abuse, and if you could.
Sure. Basically, there are two, the physical abuse and then there's the neglect. And the physical abuse is something done to a child. It's you know, the cigarette burns, it's the beating and that sort of thing. The neglect is something that isn't done for a child. The child isn't fed properly, the child is emotionally neglected. Those are the two basic kinds. And under physical abuse, there's the sexual abuse, where you know, you hear about child molestation or pedophilia, that sort of thing.
How many, the majority is of the abuse cases or the neglect, is that what you said?
About 60 to 70% are neglect. And I think many people, psychologists, experts in the field, believe that neglect is much worse than the physical abuse for most kids, because it's a long-term, ongoing, kind of under-the-surface type of thing. And telling a child that you don't want them, that they're no good, is just devastating. So those kinds of issues come up in neglect. They're hard to prove. You know, it's hard to know what's going on if you don't see it. You could just see the symptoms and the results of the neglect.
Okay. You know, you were saying that, well, do you have some statistics? Are we up from last year?
Yeah, from what I hear, there were about 6,000 referrals to the Human Services Department in 1991. How much of an increase that is, I don't know. It's substantial. Now, that is both substantiated and unsubstantiated. That's the total number. That isn't actual abuse cases that go to court. The number is much lower. There are probably about 300 cases filed in children's court every year.
We're up a little bit from 91. I think you were telling me there were about 6,000 cases reported.
Right.
Someone told me at one point Bernalillo County was just one of the highest abuse cases in the country or something.
It could be. I don't know.
We
we're
were-
high in everything, it seems.
We were averaging, I thought we were averaging a child death almost one a month or something for.
I'm not aware of that.
Not aware of that?
No. It seems a little high. But
Seems a little
It's
high?
possible.
It's possible, okay. Well, I'm probably wrong. So you were saying the problems you run into are things like, the problem that you run into with the parents are things like substance abuse and emotionally unstable parents. You want to talk about that a little bit? Or?
Well, I think if you're talking about really tough cases, the ones involving substance abuse where the parent isn't in their right mind, it's hard to break through. And if a parent doesn't want to quit the habit, can't deal with the addiction, then you really can't go anywhere. You can't deal with them. And the child still wants to be loved by the parent. They want to have a family, but the parent is off somewhere else. And unless they come down to earth, stop the addiction, there's very little hope of reuniting the family.
You know, they say that one practicing alcoholic or drug addict adversely affects the lives of 26 other people. Mm-hmm. In our experience in having guests like yourself on the program, most major social problems you can point to drug addiction and alcoholism as being major factors in the creation of those problems.
Well, definitely.
We are going to take a short break, go to our producer commentary here. We hope that you will stay with us because we are going to be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Krachowski, producer of Speaking of Men. Once again, it's time to make a call for more participation. And how can you participate in this show? Let's start with the easiest way possible. If you like what you see here, tell your friends about our program and urge them to watch. They have 3 chances to see us each weekend, beginning on Friday evening. On a level only slightly more demanding, send us your comments either in writing or by phoning me at 268-5260. Let us know what you like or dislike about the show, what you'd like to hear more about, or whom you'd like to see as a guest. If you send your comments in writing, we'll read your letter on the air and share your thoughts with the rest of our viewers. Finally, if you have even a mild interest in helping us produce this program, call us and we'll tell you how you can become a studio or field crew member, a contributor, or even a co-host. Give it some thought. We always need additional help. I'm Mike Krachowski, thanking you for watching Speaking of Men, Albuquerque's forum on men's issues.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. This is Public Access Television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. We hope that you will consider participating in the program itself or in other men's activities throughout the city. You make a difference. If you don't, nobody does. Our guest today is Randy Noah. Randy is the program director for the CASA program here, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate, which focuses on asking for information and assisting the judge in gathering an accurate picture of what is happening in homes where a child is being either physically, emotionally, or sexually abused. Randy, you tell me how you got involved. What are some of the responsibilities that a CASA volunteer might have, some of your goals, etc., if you would.
I became involved in 1985 at the request of Judge Brown, who was the children's court judge at the time, and he felt he wanted a program based on a model from Seattle, Washington. And I was working in the probation department at the time and ran a couple programs for them using volunteers, and so I was the logical choice. And so I put together the program and have been doing it ever since. For a while there I was working for both probation and children's court, and now I work just for children's court. The responsibilities of a CASA, basically, as far as skills, you have to be able to express yourself. You have to be able to interview people in a non-threatening way. The idea is to get information and not make judgments. So we're not trying to find good guys and bad guys. We're just trying to find out what's going on behind the scenes so that the judge can make a good decision based on accurate information.
And you have about 70 volunteers, and
Right.
you're looking for, what, a one-year commitment from them?
1-year commitment. It's about 2 hours a week, and that varies, but it's a pretty flexible kind of program. Most of our people work full-time, and if they can make a phone call every once in a while to a therapist to check up on a parent's therapy, if they can make a home visit occasionally on the weekends, go visit a foster family, go to one of the perhaps group homes that a child might be in, those are all part of the commitment. But as far as, I think what gets people is the length of time. In these cases, you want things to happen very quickly, but the court has its own inertia, and it seems slow to people who aren't used to it. And I think there are reasons for that. You don't want to make quick judgments on these cases, and you might feel like this is what's got to be done, this is the right thing to do, and then a few months later it changes. So you have to have all the information available before you make this decision whether to remove a child permanently from their home or whether to return them.
So the background of a person who might want to be a CASA would be just an average business person who was interested in volunteering some time in the community. Then.
Right, right.
You were saying that you thought that men do well in this program, and it might be an opportunity for men. Why did you think men more than women, maybe?
Well, I don't know if it's more than women. I think that men tend to shy away from this kind of volunteer work. They think, well, this is parenting. I'm supposed to parent an abused child. I don't know if I can do that. But that's not the CASA's role. That's not what's involved. What's involved is gathering information. You may have contact with the child, you may not, and we're talking about some kids who are infants. So, the parenting isn't there. It's basically to make sure that they're taken care of. And, we all have this irrational, I guess you'd call it, need to be loved by our parents no matter how they treat us. And the idea is to make sure that that is important, that isn't forgotten, but at the same time that the child's best interests are first and foremost, and that they don't get lost in the shuffle. So that the CASA is there speaking up for them, saying, Your Honor, I think that this is a good deal, that the child should be returned home. There's been a lot of progress made. Let's do something along those lines.
If there was ever a opportunity for someone to be one of those points of light that President Bush talks about, this certainly
and one of our CASAs was. In 1991.
Is that right?
Yeah, she went to the White House. Sharon Lawrence down in Roswell went to the White House and was presented an award, and went to that big celebration in Disney World and all that sort of thing. So yeah, we are a point of light.
That's great stuff to hear. Is there a number somebody might call, or how might people become, if they were interested in getting some information, would they just call your office?
Yeah, that would be the best way.
And what was the number for that?
841-7388.
We'll get it on the screen, I'm sure, but
Okay.
Might as well say it as well. And I noticed that you have some printed information they could get and things.
Oh,
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk about some of the. There's a guy named Olaf Hogg. He's a Norwegian poet, and I was reading a little short piece of his the other day, and he was talking about the fact that nobody wants to be the seed, nobody wants to be the leaf fighting its way out of the cold ground in the spring, or the stem standing up to the weather. Everybody wants to be the bloom, And that's not nuts and bolts reality that you would deal with, especially in something like child abuse. Let's talk about some of those blooms and rewards a little bit, and look at some of the successes and failures that the program and situations people might be involved in.
Well, I think it's a good quote to mention, because everybody wants to be the star, the savior of the child, and it's not that easy. As far as success cases, it's mainly a matter of making a difference over the long run, being there for the child when they need you, and it may not be this week or next month, it may be 6 months from now. So the idea is to kind of persevere, to keep at it, to keep chipping away at it. One particular case, we had a CASA who, well, the case involved a young girl who was molested by her mother's boyfriend, and the mother was told not to have any association with the boyfriend in the future, period. She agreed to that, and she was going along with the treatment plan very well, and things were progressing. It all worked out, or it seemed to be working out, and everybody was to the point of, let's return the child. Let's dismiss this case, case closed. The CASA had a hunch, went to the home uninvited. It was kind of a surprise visit, and found that the boyfriend was there, and he had actually married the mother a month or so earlier. No one knew that. No one else in the case knew that. And the CASA brought that to the court's attention about 2 days later at a hearing, and of course it turned the case completely around. Instead of returning the child, the parental rights were terminated, and the child was placed with an adoptive family. So you can't assume anything, and that's part of what a system means. It means that certain assumptions have to be made. And to break that, you have to have people who are naive, who are questioners, who are non-assumers, stumbling around, if you will, and finding out things that are going on that no one else will.
Got any examples of failures where things might not have gone so well?
Well, not specifically. I think people feel failure when things don't go the way they think they should. Sometimes they stick with it, and eventually things may turn around. In some cases, they get discouraged and they leave the program. There's no way you can deal with that. It's just human nature. You want to see results. You're there because you want to be, and sometimes you're treated like, well, you're an outcast. You don't agree with other people, therefore they don't want to have anything to do with you. The parents might not like you. The social worker might not think that you're doing a good job. And so why do it? I mean, why am I here? This is very discouraging. So those are the kinds of things we have to deal with.
So what this is would be very day-to-day gathering of facts and observing and being involved, and it's not something you go out and just get a whiz-bang payoff on. But it is something that would make a difference, especially to the child's life, 5 years, 10 years down the road. You had mentioned there's a book, High-Risk Children Without a Conscience by Ken Magid?
Magid.
Magid. Mm-hmm. And you want to talk a little bit about the book?
Well, I think it brings very well, it makes a very good point about kids who are unattached, kids who don't bond, who are neglected, who don't seem to care about anything. These are our worst criminals, our serial rapists, our most violent criminals. And the problem with these people is that it's not a matter of being angry when you lash out and hurt someone. It's a matter of just not caring. And so you can have street gangs, you can have individuals, the Jeffrey Dahmers, the kinds of people who work, marginally in society. No one notices them, but they have all this pent-up anger. They have no attachment to anyone, no love for anyone. And the book brings this out in very, very clearly.
In your experience, is it true that most abusers were people who were abused?
Quite a number, quite a number. It's not necessarily what happens, but I think people who have experienced abuse have a tougher time of it. And I think they have more anxiety as parents, and they wonder more about how they're going to deal with their problem, because it's most of the time it's within. It's something that they have to cope with themselves, and it only comes out occasionally during anger moments, and it can reflect on the child.
I see. Do you want to say some things about the importance of community involvement and the importance of lay people being involved?
Well, I think to me that's the key. Child abuse is something that most people don't want to think about, and it's not something that you think of when you think of volunteering. You think of social workers, you think of professionals, police officers, laws, that sort of thing. But I think what most of these families need is someone to throw them a lifeline, somebody who isn't paid, somebody who isn't trying to prove something one way or the other, somebody who can be on their side. The CASA is there to hopefully preserve the family, to work with the family. And that's something that means a lot to people. It's often overlooked in today's society. We're rather separate from each other, and to have someone come and just talk to you about your problems, somebody who's not doing it for a paycheck, means a lot. There's that communication there, and I think that's the key to our success. It breaks through some of the barriers.
You know, there's a fellow named Tom Reinhardt who was a guest. I don't know if you know Tom or not. He's got the Youth at Risk program, and he talks about the fact that it's real important for people who don't have life skills and the ability to succeed in society to at least have the opportunity occasionally to, especially for youngsters, to be in contact with people who are successful and have life skills. A lot of that's just not passed on. We're going to take a short break here, and we will have another commentary and a short film about CASA. So we hope that you will stay with us, because we will be right back.
Children and guns are a deadly combination. In the last 5 years, 25 of New Mexico's children have been killed accidentally while playing with loaded guns. An additional 200 children were shot through gunplay over the same period. Almost all of these injuries occurred when children found loaded, unsecured guns at home. Please don't let your children become one of these statistics. If you have guns at home, for any reason, please keep them unloaded. Keep them locked in a safe place, away from your children. Use locked trigger guards, and keep ammunition stored in a separate location. This message has been brought to you by the Emergency Medical Department of the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. As a personal side note, I'd like to mention that good quality locking trigger guards are available for less than $10 each. If you own a gun, chances are it's worth several $100s. Isn't it worth an additional $10 to safeguard your child's precious life, or the life of your child's playmate?
There are nearly 500,000 abused, neglected, and abandoned children in America today, and sooner or later most of them will end up here, in a courtroom where a judge will try to decide what's best for each child's future. And that's where you come in. As a CASA volunteer, a court-appointed special advocate for children, you could be a child's voice in court. It's important work and very gratifying. Be a CASA volunteer. Speak up for a child.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. You're watching Public Access Television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am your host, Mike Rivas, and this is our guest, Randy Noah. And Randy is the director of the Children's Court CASA program here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And what we're talking about is an opportunity for people to be involved in assisting the court in cases of child physical, sexual, emotional abuse, and an opportunity for someone who might be interested in being a real point of light, and instead of talking about the weather, doing something about it. Randy, what makes a parent abuse a child?
Well, there's a number of factors. The actual act of hitting a child has a lot to do with anger, and where that anger comes from varies. Lots of people experienced abuse as children, and that's been repressed. Other people, we touched on the substance abuse. I mean, there are issues that they can't handle. They resort to substance abuse, and as a result, they're not doing their job as parents. We're not trying to find good parents and bad parents. There isn't black and white. I think every parent is capable and probably at some point or another abuses their child. So the issue isn't what parents are good and should keep their kids and what parents are bad. The idea is to get their attention long enough to say, you need to change things. You cannot keep treating your children the way you're treating them. You cannot treat yourself the way you're treating yourself. Take some time. Let's talk about it. Therapy is provided. And in those cases where people are willing to take some time and say, yeah, I have been a bad parent and I need to change, the prognosis is very good. Again, going back to the idea that the kids are waiting on the sideline, waiting for this parent to parent well enough that they can go back. Even if they've been abused, it isn't a matter of saying, well, my dad hit me or my mother hit me and therefore they're a bad parent and I don't want to have anything to do with them. And it's not a matter of being able to cut that off after a certain age, too. People who are 50, 60, 70 years old or who are abused wonder about it and wonder why they weren't able to reconcile themselves with their parents, why there wasn't any kind of communication.
You know, one of the things that we discovered in our interview with the people from the Rape Crisis Center here in Albuquerque, which is a great group and been around for a long time, is that there are a lot of programs after the act, but there's very little going on beforehand. I wondered if you could recommend a program that someone watching the show who might be having problems parenting could get in touch with.
Well, there's an excellent outfit in town called All Faiths Receiving Home. You're right. There are a lot of programs that deal with abuse once it's occurred, and you're condemned at that point. All Faiths has a couple of programs. I'm not sure what the prerequisites are for one getting involved. It's a sliding fee scale, so it's not a money issue. It's something called Parents Anonymous, which is a group process involving parents who have abused their children. I think if you call a crisis hotline type thing set up by Human Services, you'll get the response, have you abused your child? If you haven't, then we can't help you. I might be wrong, but our experience has been people who are reaching out are having a very hard time finding someone to say, okay, you haven't gone all the way yet. You haven't struck your child. You haven't abused your child badly. You need to be dealt with right now and not after the fact.
You bet. I'm wondering, I'm wondering if there are any things that you would that you'd like to say. We have about 2 minutes left, and I wonder if you'd like to say anything in closing.
The CASA's role is unique. There's no one else like the CASA involved in these cases. So it's not a matter of a very good-natured, good-willed volunteer getting in the way of professionals. It's a matter of somebody stepping into a vacuum and filling it. The motto, more or less, is speak up for a child's voice in court. The child has an attorney in all these cases, but that attorney has other cases, and they don't have the time to devote to the case. The CASA, spending 2 hours a week, becomes an expert in the case, and no one else can do that as well. So we're not talking about people who are psychologists or therapists being CASAs. We're talking about people with no idea of how the system operates and adding what they can, and it's substantial.
Randy, I'd like to thank you for coming down, spending a half hour with us on a Saturday, and anyone who is interested in participating in the program, please give Randy a call at the number on the screen. We'd also like to thank everybody who helped make this program possible, and especially our fine crew. We'd like to thank our viewers for watching. If you'd like to comment on this show, watch for our phone number and address in the credits. We're always interested in your feedback. Albuquerque viewers can see repeat broadcasts. Check the program. This is Mike Rivas telling you to stand if you can, run if you have to, but don't quit.